Hello, thank you everybody. I'm Prue Huddleston and this is my colleague and friend Heidi Ashton. I think Simon Field played into our hands beautifully just then, because in all that speech we only heard about employers. We didn't hear once about self-employed people or people who work freelance. So we're going to change that. Our presentation is all about the world of self-employment and freelance work, because it's a very big part of the labour market and it's very much neglected within a lot of the literature. And we're using as an example the creative and cultural sector, which has a very large number of self-employed freelance workers within it. So that's our context, and we have a particular case study taken from the world of performing arts, which Heidi is going to tell us about her research. And so it's over to Heidi for the case study and some background on this huge sector and growing sector where the majority of people are self-employed and freelance. Heidi.
So we just wanted to give you a quick overview of the creative industries. It's often project-based production, which means you get a number of freelancers from different specialisms coming together for one project. And when the project is complete, they then disperse and they're all off onto another project elsewhere. As a contribution to the economy, it's actually very important. So this is a lot of these statistics are from the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. The creative industries, I think this was 2014, were worth 84.1 billion. That has been growing year on year, so it will be more now. The DCMS have often kind of presented the cultural industries as a real growth, a very important part of our growth in our economy. So since 2008, during the recession, it was actually one of the few industries and few areas that was growing within the economy and was seen as a driver of the economy at that time. So we can see that the gross value added of the creative industries increased by 15.6%, and that's about a year or two old now, so it's only the most recent figures that we have, but that was compared with 5.4% for the UK as a whole. So it is a very important area that is sadly been missing. So the research that I'm drawing on today actually focuses on freelance dancers. And although it may seem that that's something kind of a bit strange and out there, a lot of the findings are actually also found in lots of the other creative industries, and particularly the issues around what it is to be a freelancer. So in terms of their experience in school, it was pretty much universal that they felt alienated from school. This was a gradual process that they felt that their activities outside of school were something that they could relate to. They could understand the people that they were with, they identified the people that they were with, and increasingly they did not identify with school. It was something that they did because they had to, because you get up in the morning and that's what you do, you go to school, and then afterwards that's when you do all of that's when you actually go somewhere where you feel like you belong. And by the time they got to the end, there was a real disconnect between what they were getting in school and what they valued in what they wanted to do in terms of their career. So before I started my GCSEs, I'd already got into loan, so I didn't really care. It didn't mean anything because entry into vocational training did not require them to have GCSEs, it required them to audition. So what was important was what they were learning outside, because that was important for their career, and what they were learning inside school was seen as pretty much irrelevant. And this was seen actually in both directions. So they didn't feel it was relevant, and they also felt that the people in school, so this is careers officers, and everybody had a story about their careers advisors and not having thinking of a proper job, these sorts of things. But also it kind of went deeper than that. So I often found, because they were teachers, they didn't kind of get it, because it's such a completely different type of thing and it's a different world almost. So he goes on to say that, I had to explain, it's not like that, you have an audition, it's completely different. So they felt that they not only were they not understood, but that the school didn't understand, and the people within the school didn't understand the industry that they were going into, that they were having to educate their teachers to tell them what was required for them to go into this industry. But they also felt that what they knew and the skills that they had and that they had developed outside weren't valued in the school. So yes, they didn't really value GCSEs because it wasn't relevant in their world, but the skills they did have, they felt weren't valued. People didn't know what auditions were, they didn't know what was required of them in those situations, and therefore there was a real sense of alienation. So what skills do they have? Well, freelancers spend a lot of time working to get work. So because you are constantly moving from job to job to job, you're constantly having to keep your skills updated, and that's for you to do. That's your responsibility. They have the ability to present themselves, so that's in auditions and those sorts of areas, but it also might be in other industries, presenting a portfolio of your work. Or these are skills that they don't learn in school. These are skills that they've learned outside when they've been in their training. So they're very resilient and they're very resourceful. So they often have little things on the side all the time. So they might be doing a bit of teaching. So even if a dancer gets a good contract, for example, in a West End show, that's 11 months employment then. So that's about the longest contract you're going to have. Even in those circumstances, which is considered pretty stable, they will be doing a bit of teaching on the side, or they'll be developing their own act that they can then sell for events and cruise ships and those sorts of things. When they can't be doing it, they'll be employing other people to go and do it, so that they've always got irons in the fire, if you like, so they've always got options. And although a lot of them weren't continually, in fact, I don't think any of them were in continual employment, there wasn't anybody who was relying on benefits. So they would always find work in between. And sometimes they had to adapt this completely into another sphere. So they often did low-skilled jobs, like they did promotional work, they did front of house, but again, often where they're customer-facing, where they're using their skills that they've learned elsewhere. And teamwork was particularly important. When you are having to work with a new team constantly, and there's a saying that you're only ever as good as your last gig. So you have to be, you're constantly networking, you're constantly meeting new people, and it's important that you always make a good impression, because you may be relying on that person for your next job. Somebody who you're dancing with on this job might be the choreographer on the next job and picking. And if you haven't managed to create good impression and you're going to a good colleague, then they're not going to want to work with you again. So teamwork is again very important. And they're also incredibly adaptable. So they adapt very quickly to the new environment, but again, because they have to. You go into a new project, you have to very quickly understand what's going on, what the hierarchy is, what the situation. That would be very different, for example, if you're dancing in a film than if you're dancing in theatre, or for a one-off event, or for a television series. So you have to be able to go in, understand the situation, analyse it, and get on with the job very, very quickly. And one of the respondents says, we adapt very, very quickly because we have to. And again, this is a skill that they've had to develop. So social networks then become very, very important. A lot of the work that they get is via social media and via the people that they've met. So they might be recommended for a job, for example. And that again happens across the creative industries. It happens very regularly. There are certain Facebook sites that are specifically for people in particular industries, within the creative industries, that say, oh, we're looking for, does anybody know, I don't know, a project manager for this TV series. And people will send in their CV on the basis of a recommendation. So it's not just dance where that's an incredibly important part of it. But it was interesting to hear us talk about culture, and I think that this sense of alienation then continues through. So unfortunately, by the time dancers reach their 30s, they actually have this massive skill set that would be desirable for many employers. They're very creative, they're very adaptable, they have a very keen commercial awareness because they've had to develop themselves, sell themselves, understand the market. So a cameraman, for example, will have to look at his skills and look at the new technology that's available and upskill themselves. So they're very aware, they're very, very market aware. All of these things which are very, very desirable, and they come to the end of their career and they feel so disconnected from the rest of the world, which has started from school, that they cannot see a way that they can connect back in. I'm going to hand over to Prue to develop a conversation further.
Okay, thank you. So that was a particular example from the world of dance, but as Heidi said, it happens across the cultural and creative industries. And for me, coming from education, but from someone who passed to the dark side from dance and theatre, as Heidi has done, but still continues in both worlds, what's the problem? What's the issue? Well, they're different worlds. As Heidi described, what young people are faced with, certainly in England, is a curriculum which was so tightly prescribed around individual subjects, so dominated by that whole mindset, plus the targets attached to it, that opportunities to do other types of creative things have been completely pushed out. There is very little opportunity now to do that, because these things, points don't win prizes in terms of the league tables, not if you're an actor, dancer, photographer, graphic designer. Also, the sort of assessment regimes that operate in secondary schools in England are inimical to the sort of assessment that you would be expected to undertake within the creative and cultural sector. You don't sit and write an exam. You have to present your work or your show reel, or you have to dance or act or play the piano or whatever. You have to show you can bloody well do it. And that is very different. In fact, that is often thought tantamount to cheating in the current environment. If you're doing work in a group together, you know, what is the value of this assessment? It isn't a written test. Also, the latest pronouncements, of course, fail to recognise the creative subjects as serious subjects. They don't carry EBAC recognition. And here are some figures. 50% drop in the GCSE numbers for design and technology. Amazing, at a time when we're being told we need more designers, more creative people, growing industries. 50% drop in entries. Drama again, 25% drop in other craft-related subjects. So it's a very dismal picture in terms of preparation of young people to become more creative, not to turn them all into actors, dancers, cameramen, filmmakers, but actually to learn some of those skills to which Heidi alluded, that come with that freelance type of work. Also, I think there is a lack of understanding about what is required within this sector. And you don't get that from careers talks or employers visiting your school, unless they happen to be actors, dancers, filmmakers, graphic designers who are self-employed. It's no good having somebody come from a great big organisation. And just a couple of quotes here from employers from a range of different research. You know, there is no such thing as a career for life. There sure ain't in the creative arts, particularly performing arts. You bust your ankle, as I did, you've had it. And I'm sure Heidi's full of tales about this. So you have to be creative and find another way. It's just not a linear progression. And of course, you need huge confidence to put yourself forward in order to make a pitch for the jobs. And surely these are skills that are useful to anybody. How many people who are employed in whatever sector are required to make a presentation, to have those sorts of skills, to engage with an audience, to be mindful, where's the next job coming on? Who do I need to network with? These are just skills which are essential, really, for anybody, and particularly for anyone who's trying to work freelance or become self-employed. Also, you know, we don't realise perhaps what contribution the creative and cultural industries make within the wider world in helping young people to develop their creativity. And there are lots of wonderful examples, but these are mainly coming from charitable organisations who are trying to keep these things going in the absence of other opportunities within the mainstream curriculum. This is just one that I'm very much involved with in Birmingham, which is an outreach programme by Birmingham Royal Ballet to schools in the inner city. Right, so what do we hope for? Well, firstly, that education could provide young people with a more realistic view of employment,
tell it like it is. 15% of the workforce is self-employed. This is likely to grow. We should recognise that the creative and cultural sector is a very rich source of evidence and of expertise in all kinds of ways, and can provide role models to which young people can relate. Young people tend to be very interested in music, in media, in dance, in film. They're interested. It would speak to their interests, and it's a rich source of expertise. And education quality professionals really should recognise those influences beyond school that really shape young people's interests and interests. So I think our plea is, and I'd just like to end here with a quote from Andy Hargreaves, who reflects on what's been happening. While the compelling need for creativity, care and compassion across the world has been growing, the greatest global educational trend for the past 2 decades ran completely contrary to it, driven by the promise of short-term results. So we'd like to thank you for that and invite questions.